The war was over. France lay under German occupation. The country trembled like a defeated wrestler pinned to the ground beneath the victor's knee. From Paris, exhausted, starved, inconsolable, the first trains crawled slowly past fields and villages toward the new borders. Passengers gazed from the windows at the ravaged land, at the charred remains of homes. At the doors of surviving houses, Prussian soldiers in black helmets tipped with brass smoked pipes, straddling overturned chairs. Some worked or chatted as if they belonged there. In the towns, entire regiments marched across the squares, and through the rumble of wheels, guttural commands reached the ears of the travelers. Monsieur Dubuis, who had served in the National Guard throughout the siege, was now heading to Switzerland to reunite with his wife and daughter, whom he had sent away before the occupation for their safety. Hunger and hardship had left no mark on his solid frame. He was a prosperous, peaceable merchant. He had met the horrors of war with quiet despair and lamented the savagery of mankind. Now that it was over, he was traveling toward the border and, for the first time, saw the Prussians with his own eyes, though during the siege he had dutifully stood guard on the ramparts through many a freezing night. He looked with dread and smoldering resentment at the bearded, armed men who had settled on French soil as if it were their own. In his heart, a powerless patriotic fury flared, mingling with a new and potent instinct for caution. An instinct that had now become part of the French character. In his compartment sat two English tourists, observing the scene with calm curiosity. Both were stout, conversing in their own language, flipping through a guidebook and reading aloud so as not to miss a single landmark. At one stop, in a small town, a Prussian officer entered the carriage, his saber clanking against the steps. He was tall, tightly buttoned into his uniform, with a fiery red beard that seemed to grow from his very eyes, and long, lighter-colored mustaches that jutted outward, slicing his face in two. The Englishman began to examine him with interest, while Monsieur Dubuis pretended to read his newspaper, shrinking into the corner like a thief who had spotted a gendarme. The train moved on. The Englishmen resumed their discussion, pointing out battle sites. When one gestured toward a distant village, the Prussian officer stretched out his legs, leaned back, and said, "I killed 12 French in that village. I take more than 100 prisoner." The Englishman, intrigued, asked, "Oh, and what is the name of that village?" "Froschwiller," the officer replied, then added, "I grabbed those French scoundrels by the collar." He glanced at Monsieur Dubuis, smirking into his beard. The train rolled on, passing one occupied settlement after another. German soldiers stood along the roads, at checkpoints, at cafe tables, like locusts swarming the land. The officer extended his hand. "If I had command, I take Paris. I burn everything. I kill everyone. France kaput." The Englishman, maintaining politeness, responded briefly, "Oh," but the officer continued, "In 20 years, all Europe, yes, all, will belong to us. Prussia strongest of all." The Englishmen grew wary and fell silent. Their faces froze like wax masks framed by sideburns. The Prussian laughed. Sprawled on the bench, he jeered at crushed France, at Austria, at the desperate resistance of the provinces, at the militias, at the paralyzed artillery. He boasted that Bismarck planned to build a city of iron from captured cannons. At last, he nearly jabbed his boots into Monsieur Dubuis's side. The latter sat flushed, staring away. The Englishmen seemed to lose interest in the scene, as if they had mentally retreated to their island, shutting out the world. The officer pulled out a pipe and, staring directly at the Frenchman, asked, "You have tobacco?" "No, sir," replied Monsieur Dubuis. "I asked you go buy me tobacco when train stopped." The German continued, then laughed again and added, "I give you tip." The locomotive whistled, slowing down. Burnt station buildings came into view. The train stopped. The German flung open the door and tugged Monsieur Dubuis by the sleeve. "Go carry out my order, quickly, quickly." The station was occupied by a German detachment. Behind a wooden fence, soldiers crowded together, watching the train with curious eyes. The locomotive was already whistling, signaling departure. At that moment, Monsieur Dubuis suddenly leapt onto the platform and, ignoring the station master's protesting gestures, rushed into the adjacent building. He was alone. He unbuttoned his vest, his heart pounding so fiercely it felt ready to burst, wiped his brow, and struggled to catch his breath. The train stopped again at another station. A Prussian officer peeked into the compartment and stepped inside, followed shortly by the two Englishmen, drawn by curiosity. The German sat down opposite the Frenchman and, smirking, said, "You did not want to carry out my order." "Yes, sir," Monsieur Dubuis replied calmly. The train began to move. "I will cut your mustache to fill my pipe," the officer declared, reaching toward his neighbor's face. The Englishman watched with the same unflinching, focused expression. The German had already pinched a few hairs between his fingers when Monsieur Dubuis suddenly struck his hand away, grabbed him by the collar, and hurled him onto the bench. He seemed to lose all control. The veins on his temples bulged, his eyes filled with blood. With one hand, he continued to choke the officer, while the other, clenched into a fist, rained furious blows upon his face. The Prussian tried to fight back, to draw his saber, to grapple with his attacker, but Dubuis threw his full weight onto him and kept striking blindly, relentlessly. Blood streamed down the officer's face. He gasped, choked, spat out teeth, desperately trying to push away the enraged Frenchman and save himself. The Englishman stood and stepped closer, eager not to miss a single detail. They watched with keen interest, even delight. Another moment, and they might have started placing bets on the outcome. But Monsieur Dubuis suddenly weakened, rose without a word, and returned to his seat. The Prussian was so stunned, so shaken and battered, that he didn't even attempt to retaliate. Catching his breath, he muttered, "If you do not give me satisfaction with pistols, I will kill you." "I accept. Whenever you wish," Dubuis replied. "This is Strasbourg," the German continued. "I will find 2 officers as witnesses. I have time before the train departs." Monsieur Dubuis puffed like a locomotive. "Would you be my seconds?" he asked the Englishman. Both responded in unison. "Oh, yes." The train came to a halt. The Prussian quickly found 2 companions who brought pistols, and the whole group headed toward the fortress rampart. The Englishmen kept checking their watches, urging the preparations along, afraid of missing the train's departure. Monsieur Dubuis had never held a pistol before. He was placed 20 paces from his opponent. One of the witnesses asked, "Are you ready?" "Yes," he replied, noticing one of the Englishmen opening an umbrella to shield himself from the sun. The command rang out. "Fire!" Dubuis fired blindly, without waiting. To his astonishment, he saw the Prussian stagger, flail his arms, and collapse face first. Monsieur Dubuis had killed him. "Oh!" cried one of the Englishmen, trembling with excitement, satisfied curiosity, and joyful thrill. The other, still clutching his watch, grabbed Dubuis by the sleeve and marched him briskly back to the station. The first Englishman strode with firm resolve, fists clenched, elbows tucked to his sides. 1-2, 1-2, all 3, plump and awkward, ran in a row, like comic figures cut from a satirical magazine. The train was already moving. They jumped aboard on the run. Only then did the Englishmen remove their travel caps, wave them overhead, and shout 3 times. "Hip, hip, hip, hooray!" Then each solemnly shook Monsieur Dubuis's hand, and both settled beside him on the bench, flushed with excitement and satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to the channel. Share your impressions and thoughts in the comments. I'd be delighted to hear from you.